Well, welcome everyone to this annual general meeting for VANISH. We have a very special presentation in advance of the actual formality of the meeting. But to begin, I wish to acknowledge the ancestors, elders and families of the Bunwurrung and Woiwurrung of the Kulin as the traditional owners of the land VANISH operates from. I acknowledge the stories, traditions, and living cultures of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples on this land, and pay respect to the deep knowledge embedded within the Aboriginal community and their ownership of country. To introduce our guest presenter all the way from California, I welcome Charlotte Smith, the manager of VANISH, who will introduce our presenter.
Thank you, Simon. Welcome, everybody. It's really lovely to see so many of you could attend this online event. And I'm also really thrilled that we have such a special speaker today. So very often when someone comes to VANISH for assistance, they have very little information about the various impacts of separation and adoption. So we discuss with them some of the common issues, and we provide useful articles for them to read. And one such article is a condensed version of the tables from the book 7 Core Issues in Adoption, written in 1986 by Sharon Kaplan Roszia and Deborah Silverstein. This document's really frequently downloaded from our website and given to our service users, and many of them say they find it incredibly useful information. Now, one of the silver linings of us not being able to gather in person like we normally do is that we get the opportunity to invite an international guest speaker. So we're therefore delighted that Sharon agreed to present for us today. Sharon has a long history in the world of adoption and has been a pioneer and leader in the field. Her first book, Cooperative Adoption, co-written with Mary Rilera in 1985, is a handbook for open adoption and how to include natural parents in a child's life. This was a new concept in the US back then and not always popular. And like our pioneers here in Victoria who fought for open adoption and open records, Sharon received some fairly poor treatment as a result of her views and her teachings. But those teachings have really stood the test of time and thankfully are now more widely accepted. Sharon recently updated 7 Core Issues in Adoption together with Allison Davis Maxon, and it's this updating and the new content that we're going to hear about today. I've seen and heard Sharon's past presentations, and I know she'll share her compelling ideas and insights generously and engagingly. You're welcome to ask questions through the Q&A function, and we'll have a short Q&A session at the end. So thank you, and now I'm very pleased to welcome Sharon Kaplan Roszia.
Hello, everybody. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. And it was so wonderful to connect with Dr. Green at a conference in Washington, D.C. 2 years ago, and then to make the acquaintance of Charlotte and Simon, who've been absolutely fabulous to work with. And I'm so impressed with the vision and purpose and work of VANISH. It's clear that you've all benefited from a phenomenal group of people. I'm very aware that the majority of folks that are listening are either adopted individuals or professionals and what you would call natural parents, I would call birth first parents. I really do want to honor every single person who's listening to me and watching the PowerPoint, that you've each had your own life experiences and reactions to those experiences are different. And I want to hold those dear to my heart and honor each and every one of you. I'd like to introduce you by way of my belief system that started forming in 1963. I've been deeply impacted by the world of adoption. And I have to tell you that close friends, who include many adopted people who've been in my life as lifelong friends, and many, many birth first parents who've become members of my own extended family, have over the years stripped away any defenses as a professional and battered me with honest information and feelings that have changed my perspective on adoption totally over the years. In addition, I've certainly learned a lot from my own children who came home in a variety of ways, and the many families that I've served in the past and continue to serve today. Charlotte sent me some incredibly helpful information about the history of adoption in Australia, which was certainly extremely impactful. I do not in any way wish to offend, so I ask for forgiveness in advance if I say anything that injures any of you. I really would feel terrible if that was the case. I know that the subject I'm talking about today, the 7 core issues in adoption and permanency, can trigger very strong feelings for many. It touches wounds, it re-inflames hurt, it reminds you of experiences of alienation, and can remind us of past injuries. I do it with deep respect for your hearts and minds, and a strong belief that feeling and acknowledging the pain is what helps us to heal. It clears boulders out of the kind of the journey of our life. You know, many of us carry a lot of pain from the past, and we can choose to climb over those boulders. We can choose to dig under them. We can choose to go the long way around them. But one of the ways to live an easier and more fulfilling life is to clear those boulders out of the way. And that takes a great deal of hard work and risk. I'm not an optimist about adoption outcomes, even though I've devoted my whole adult life to it. There is so much to fix. You're already in Australia far ahead of us in the United States in addressing the changes that have made it so difficult for children to truly benefit from being replanted from family trees to other family trees. Adoption can be a healing answer for some, but the potential for pain and grief is great. It is bittersweet. I remember a child at age 7 telling me in my office that adoption shouldn't be for children because it's just too hard to understand. And I think that's true. I'm a proponent of a child not having to lose a family to gain permanency. People who commit to a child offer attachment to a child who might not otherwise be able to sink roots into the ground and grow up strong. But they should not have to lose the other folks attached to them. I do not want secrecy. I do not want separation of siblings, or to leave fathers and men out of the picture. We're still addressing, as you all know listening to me, the pain and abuses and poor practices and illegal practices of the past. The core issues can be used as a road to healing, but I would rather the need for its existence to cease to exist. However, realistically, we are all in this together. We're in the same boat. What affects one affects all the others. The world is small, and with climate change and war and refugee issues, there will always be children who need families. We all need to bring the reality that adoption is not a single problem-solving event, but one that solves some issues and creates others that can be just as painful. When we're talking about language and definitions, I want to make some equations here. When I'm talking about adoption and permanency, I'm talking about people who were either placed at birth, adopted at an older age, adopted from foster care or an institution, who were parented by kin, or who were birthed through surrogacy or third-party reproduction. When I talk about all of us, I'm borrowing a term from Dr. Michael Grand in Canada, which is the term constellation, We're all in this together, our extended families, the people we love, the people who love us, the community who serves us. Literally, the folks at VANISH are part of all of our constellation. When I say birth or first parent, you might be thinking past or forced adoptions. We settled in the book for the words birth, first parents, because most assuredly, they were at the birth, they carried the child and birthed the child, and they were the first parents and will always be the first parents and the genetic parents. When I am saying adopted persons, you may be thinking forgotten Australians who grew up in foster care and group home institutional care. And we have always had in the United States and continue to have in the United States so many young people caught in that system. If you talk about the stolen generations, I can tell you that my work with the Native American communities in the state of Arizona in the early years of my career certainly taught me about what it means to be a stolen person from a tribe. But when I'm talking here about adoption, I'm including everybody in that. Charlotte asked me, why did we write the book? Well, first of all, we needed a book. There was no book. There were lots of articles and charts and lots of people referring to it all over the internet and people using it and talking about it in classes, but there was no book, and it felt like it was time to do that. Secondly, adoption has changed significantly since Deborah Silverstein and I developed the construct in the 1980s. We needed to enlarge the definition of the word adoption to include all types of adoption, infant, older, what we call foster to adopt here in the United States, international adoption, and kinship, as well as assisted reproductive technologies. We needed to include all the new practitioners that create research and new ways of looking at who we are, other professionals who impact our social work profession, people involved in attachment work and trauma specialists, and pre and perinatal psychologists. We really needed to understand what were babies thinking and doing in utero. We needed to acknowledge adoptees gaining their voices, at least here in the United States. They're calling it flip the script. And they're doing all of their own podcasts and making movies and setting up poetry and having all kinds of conferences. They are being empowered, as are our birth first parents, by setting up their own communities as well. We needed to acknowledge the impact of social media and genetic testing and research on search and reunion. So that's why we wrote the book. How did we write it? Well, we went in and bought a ton of books. It cost a fortune. We read them and then we interviewed the authors. We spoke to the researchers. We tapped into our combined experience, both professional and personal, that gave us 83 years of learning. We picked up readers, people who would read our book when it was still in the galley form, who were members of the constellation, who could comment honestly about whether or not we were hitting home on the correct issues. And then we asked well-respected colleagues to write the other half of the book, an African-American adoptee and therapist who write about what it would be like to be Black in adoption, the same for Latin and Asian and international and search and reunion and siblings and adoptees in the schools, etc., because we knew that we didn't have all the information and that they could add to the importance of the book. Why did we add surrogacy and donor insemination? Why did we add art to the book? Well, because so many of the issues that we've learned about and made mistakes connected to in adoption are also a part of the donor conception and surrogacy world. They're kind of our cousins, and they're starting to show up at all of our conferences here in the United States. There needs to be, first of all, a whole lot more emphasis on the psychological needs of the child born to a surrogate. The baby didn't expect a change of parents. The baby's sensory system is already attuned to the surrogate mother and the other voices in the surrounding of the home. And that baby experiences many of the same attachment disruptions that have occurred for every adoptee, no matter when they found permanency. In addition, donor conceptions are typically chosen by couples with the same motivations and reasons that people choose to adopt babies, except they would like to replicate themselves or they would like to avoid having to work with a birth first family. That's been pretty much what I've heard across the board. They are male or females with fertility issues, women who cannot carry a child, individuals who have genetic disorders that they do not want passed on, marriages where there has been a vasectomy, single women, gay and lesbian households. However, what we're finding is the same secrecy and shame that's been a part of the adoption community seems to be seeping deeply into the art-built families. We're wondering about whether or not psychological screening of the donor parents ought to be used, and psychological screening and assessment of receiving parents, surrogate parents, etc. And what I'm finding in my practice is that so many families who have children by way of art technologies are not knowing how to talk to their children about it and are often avoiding the discussion and therefore creating another family secret. The fertility industry has been constructed over decades to accommodate the preferences of industry professionals. The best interests and medical needs of the people they produced have undeniably been ignored. Now, I know you're ahead of us in that way. I'm asking you to watch out for these things kind of permeating your families there as well. The children ultimately are the ones who could be most negatively affected with their health and well-being. Their needs should be the driving force in donor insemination and surrogacy. The system of adoption is a huge institution affected by both local, national, and world politics. There's a lot of money allocation issues, constant changes in personnel, poorly trained and often not enough staff and therapists, a lack of understanding around the lifelong intergenerational impact of the decisions made at a certain point in someone's life. It's going to take all of us all over the world rowing in the same direction in our field to change this, even if we don't agree with each other on everything. And it certainly takes members of the constellation to do most of the heavy lifting because you've lived it.